I used to believe that if someone loved you enough, they'd never stop choosing you. And maybe that's still true. But I think love and choosing aren't always the same thing. We were together for 6 years. Not married, but tied in all the ways that matter. Joint lease, shared bank account, same toothbrush brand. We were the couple everyone pointed at and said, goals. I even believed it myself. For a while. But you can be held without being seen. And that's what it started to feel like. Like he was holding a version of me he'd stopped paying attention to. Smiling at the shell, missing the shift underneath. He never cheated. Never yelled. Never hurt me. He just stopped arriving. Stopped meeting me in the middle. Conversations became weather reports and work updates. Our laughter got quieter. Our touches got fewer. And slowly, I started missing him while sitting right next to him. Then came Adam. Not his real name. He was a friend of a friend. An accidental guest at a game night I almost skipped. We talked over wine and cheap snacks, and he asked me, "Are you happy?" And I laughed. Too quickly, because no one asks that unless they can already see the answer. I didn't plan to fall. I planned to be loyal. I planned to fix what felt broken. But you can only fix what wants to be fixed. And we hadn't wanted each other in a long time. Just the comfort of history. With Adam, it was light. Easy. He texted me about books, about songs I'd never heard. He told me stories that had no purpose but joy. He never flirted, not really. But I noticed how alive I felt when my phone lit up with his name. And one night, when my boyfriend rolled over and said, "Good night," without even looking at me, I replied, "Good night," to a man who wasn't in the room. That was the first betrayal. The quiet kind. The kind no one hears but still echoes. It wasn't an affair. Not yet. But it was coming. I could feel it in the way I saved stories just for Adam. In how I deleted messages even when they were innocent. I was making space for him. In my day, in my mind, in my guilt. The first kiss came after too much wine and not enough resistance. It wasn't passionate. It was desperate. It felt like asking a question with your mouth. Is it still possible to feel wanted? And the answer was yes. But it came with a cost. I went home that night and curled into my boyfriend's chest. He wrapped his arms around me like always. Like nothing had changed, and I wanted to cry because everything had, not because of Adam, because I had let someone else show me what I'd been missing. The affair didn't last long. 3 months, 10 meetups. Too many lies. Adam wanted more. I wanted less. I wanted to feel again, not to rebuild something new. He told me he loved me. I told him I couldn't answer that. And I never did. Eventually it fell apart, like most things built on borrowed time. He stopped texting. I stopped looking. And I was left with the wreckage. One morning my boyfriend looked at me over coffee and said, "I don't know you anymore." And I didn't deny it. Because neither did I. I told him the truth. Not all of it, but enough. He packed a bag that night. No yelling, no tears, just a door closing that never opened again. Adam tried one last time, sent me a message that just said, "I hope you find what you're looking for." And I stared at it for a full hour before deleting it. Because the truth is, I wasn't looking for love. I was looking for proof that I could still feel. It's been over a year now. And no, I'm not with either of them. I live alone. I cook for one. I walk in silence and sit with my choices. I started writing again. Started therapy. Started saying, "I don't know," when I didn't have answers. Some days I still ache. Not for them, but for the version of me that thought love could fix loneliness. She meant well. But she was wrong. What I learned is this: love isn't supposed to wake you up. You're supposed to already be awake. Whole, stable. Ready to meet someone where they are. Not use them to escape where you are not. So no, I'm not sorry I broke, because in breaking I stopped pretending. And now I build slowly, honestly, brick by brick, alone but not lonely. I used to think healing was a finish line. That one day I'd wake up, stretch, and feel whole. Fixed. Like the pain had a shelf life, and I just had to wait it out. But healing isn't linear. It's messy. It's the days you feel strong enough to go out for coffee, followed by nights you cried because you saw someone with his smile. I started noticing the little things first. Like how I no longer felt the need to explain myself when I turned down an invite. Or how I stopped checking my phone, waiting for apologies that were never going to come. I cut my hair, bought new bedsheets, rearranged my apartment like it might change the air inside me. It didn't, but at least it gave me something to do with my hands when my mind felt like drowning. I ran into his sister at the grocery store once. She looked surprised but kind. Said, "You look different." I smiled and said thank you. What I didn't say was I am. I think about him sometimes, not in a maybe one day kind of way, more like a silent nod to the past. A chapter that closed itself. There's still guilt. It doesn't scream anymore, but it lingers like perfume on an old sweater. You forget it's there until you catch a trace and remember what it cost you. And Adam. He faded like a song I used to play on repeat. There was no final fight, no big goodbye, just distance that grew until it felt like a kindness. We were never meant to last, just to expose what needed breaking. He lit the match, but I was already dry wood. One day in therapy, my counselor asked, "If no one else ever chose you again, would you still choose yourself?" I didn't answer. Not because I didn't know, but because I finally realized. I'd never asked myself that before. I had always loved being loved. Not because it was nourishing, but because it distracted me from having to love myself. So I started small, saying no when I meant it. Setting boundaries I didn't apologize for. Not dressing up pain in poetry just to make it palatable. Letting people leave without chasing them. Letting people stay without owing them forever. It wasn't pretty. Growth rarely is. It comes with growing pains. With silence so loud it forces you to hear the things you buried. But somewhere along the way, I stopped craving chaos, stopped confusing adrenaline for affection, stopped needing someone else's reflection to recognize my own worth. I met someone new a few months ago, and this time, I didn't rush it. Didn't mold myself into what he might like. I told him the truth, not the filtered version, the ugly, beautiful, complicated truth, and he didn't flinch. He listens without fixing. He touches like he's asking permission. He doesn't try to complete me. Just walks beside me, while I stay whole on my own. It's not a fairy tale. It's real, which means it's imperfect, which means I get to be too, honestly. And when he asked if I'd ever been in love before, I said, I've mistaken a lot of things for love, but I'm still figuring out what it really feels like. He smiled and said, then let's figure it out together. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was falling. I felt like I was standing. Steady, with both feet on the ground. I thought I had learned to be whole on my own. To stand without the crutch of another's attention or the weight of old expectations. But life has a way of dragging the buried pieces of you back to the surface. No matter how many times you think you've sealed them away, it started with a phone call. A number I didn't recognize. At first, I let it ring, heart pounding in the dark of my quiet apartment. I had grown used to the silence, learned to dance with it like a partner, until now. When I finally answered, a voice I recognized but long thought muted said simply, "Can we talk?" I hesitated. Memories of broken promises, of careless whispers in the dead of night, flooded back. That voice had once promised me more than I was ready to give, demanded that I surrender a part of who I was. It was a past I'd painstakingly tried to erase from my present. But now it demanded entry. I didn't have the strength to instantly decide, so I said, tomorrow. The next day, honestly. I met him at a small cafe where sunlight filtered through stained glass windows. A confessional setting, as if we were both there to confess something we'd long hidden. The man across from me was my past incarnate, the ghost of who I had been before I learned to rebuild. He looked older, not just in years but in the wear of regret. The innocence that once lit his eyes had dimmed to a wary sorrow. Honestly. The air between us was thick with words left unsaid and apologies that had turned into bitter echoes over time. I didn't expect to see you again. He began, his voice low and uncertain. He didn't apologize immediately, didn't demand a tale of heartache. He simply said, I've been thinking. And I listened, because for a moment I wondered if, in his own way, he was also a prisoner of his mistakes. We talked about the past. The nights spent tangled in lies. The mornings after when silence became a judgment I carried like a scar. He admitted he had been lost too, that he had carried his own guilt silently over the years. But I couldn't help but remember the way he'd once made me feel alive, the thrill of a touch that felt both dangerous and liberating. I struggled with conflicting memories, the warmth of those stolen moments and the cold reality that came afterwards. As our conversation drifted from old regrets to our separate journeys of healing, I realized that I had changed, irreversibly. I had spent the time after our parting meticulously patching up the fractures that love had left behind. Learning to find comfort in my own company, in the slow, persistent art of becoming myself again, honestly. But his presence was a reminder that some wounds are not meant to fade quietly, they demand acknowledgement. For several hours, the conversation was neither accusatory nor desperate. Just honest. I told him about the therapy sessions, the nights when I'd lie awake and remember every mistake, every lie I'd told myself to justify my need to feel something, anything. He listened, his eyes shadowed with remorse, honestly, and I saw in them the reflection of a man who knew he had hurt deeply, not just another person but someone who was trying to love himself. I confessed how I had used every encounter as a patch on a sinking vessel, how I mistook attention for affection and intimacy for healing. In that moment, I knew this wasn't a call for forgiveness or a desperate plea for rekindled passion. It was simply two souls, both battered by their own histories, meeting at a crossroads of shared pain. He said, "I never meant for it to hurt you like this." But words felt too simple. They floated between us, soft and inadequate in capturing the gravity of all we had lost. I left the cafe with no promises and no resolutions. Honestly, only the raw understanding that some chapters are meant to reopen so that you can finally write their closing lines. Walking back to my apartment, honestly, the autumn breeze carried whispers of the past. The rustle of leaves reminded me that change, however painful, is inevitable. Every step was a confrontation with who I had been and a tribute to who I was becoming. That evening, I sat by the window with a glass of wine and a journal, the pages waiting to cradle my thoughts. I wrote about the echoes of old love, the unmistakable feeling of being seen and yet not recognized. I wrote about the duality of desire. How it can be both a saving grace and a pitfall that drags you back into what hurt you most. Honestly, I realized that acknowledging the past wasn't the same as being bound to it. I could honor the memories without allowing them to shackle my future. I could face the echo of his voice and let it be a lesson rather than a chain. In those quiet hours before sleep took me, I finally confronted what I had long evading. I had been using love as an escape, a temporary reprieve from the loneliness that I had buried under layers of habit and denial. I had mistaken the frantic need to be needed for genuine connection, and in that search, I had lost parts of myself that I could only now begin to reclaim. I looked back on the conversation and felt a surprising calm. It wasn't an invitation to reunite, nor a chance to mend what was broken. It was simply an honest exchange between two people who had both done things they wished they could undo. And as I wrote the final line in my journal, I understood that true healing wasn't about erasing the past but integrating it, acknowledging every scar, every mistake, and every lesson learned. In the days that followed, I let the memory of that encounter settle into me like the soft glow of twilight. I didn't contact him again, nor did I wish to. Instead, I focused on the life I was building. A life where I was no longer defined by the need for someone else to validate my existence, but by the quiet strength of my own choices. And every night, as I prepared for sleep, I remembered that sometimes the most courageous act is simply to stand in the dark, confront the ghost within, and say, "I am here, I have grown, I am enough." Healing teaches you how to walk alone. But love, real love, teaches you how to walk alongside someone without losing pace with yourself. Honestly, it had been almost 8 months since the cafe. 8 months since that closing conversation with my past. Since I'd finally told the truth out loud and let silence follow it like an exhale. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for apologies, not for redemption, and definitely not for anyone to complete me. But that's exactly when he appeared. Not Adam. Not the ex. Not a ghost from some broken chapter. Just someone new. Someone real. His name was Jonah. He wasn't flashy or intense. He didn't enter like a storm. He walked in like a breeze. Steady, quiet, patient. We met through a mutual friend who insisted I go to a small art exhibit on a rainy Friday night. I almost didn't. I almost chose comfort over risk, again. But something in me said, let the world in just a little. So I did. We stood next to each other in front of a painting that looked like a broken mirror. He said, funny how something shattered can still look beautiful if you frame it right." I turned to him, caught off guard. Not just by the words, honestly, but by the way they felt like he wasn't talking about the painting at all. We didn't rush. No numbers exchanged that night, just a conversation that lingered hours past the gallery's close, followed by a, "Maybe I'll see you around." He messaged me 2 days later. Said, "Honestly, I haven't stopped thinking about the mirror." And just like that, a door I hadn't realized was still closed cracked open. We took it slow. Not because he asked to, but because I did. I told him about the damage. Not all at once, but enough. He didn't flinch. He never tried to fix me. Just stayed. He stayed through awkward pauses. Through my occasional distance. He stayed when I pulled back out of habit, when my walls creaked with old fear and my trust showed its fractures. He made me tea. Not flowers. Not grand gestures. Just tea. Without asking how I liked it. But somehow always getting it right. He never made me feel like I had to earn his attention, honestly. And that terrified me. Because I didn't know what to do with safety. I didn't know how to stop performing. One night, after dinner, honestly, I sat across from him and confessed something I'd never said before. "I'm scared that if you see all of me, you'll leave." He didn't reassure me with cliches. He just looked at me and said, "Then let's go slow enough that I see you piece by piece." That night, for the first time in years, I cried during intimacy. Not because I was hurt, but because it was so gentle. I didn't know where to put the ache that had always come with being touched. He held me afterward, no questions. Just silence that felt like presence instead of distance. And I realized that love doesn't always arrive like thunder. Sometimes it arrives like breath. Soft. Repetitive. Life-giving. There were still days I flinched when he said he'd call and didn't. Moments I panicked when he seemed distant, even if it was just because he was tired or distracted. Trauma has a long shadow. It teaches you that love is conditional, that silence is punishment, that you're always one mistake away from being abandoned. But Jonah taught me something else. He taught me that real intimacy is not just closeness. It's consistency. It's not just passion, it's presence. It's not just, "I love you." It's, "I'll show up for you." And slowly, I began to believe I deserved that. One morning, I looked at myself in the mirror. No makeup, hair a mess, eyes swollen from sleep. And I thought, this is the version of me I never let anyone see. But Jonah had. And he stayed. And more importantly, I stayed. I didn't self-sabotage. I didn't ghost him when he got too close. I didn't chase chaos just to feel alive. Instead, I leaned into the unfamiliar, the steadiness, the softness, the safety. I'm not saying I'm healed. I don't even think that's the goal anymore. But I am healing, in moments, in breath, in choices, and for the first time in a long time, I'm not running.